You're watching World Championship Wreckage, brought to you by Rivet City Radio and the World Championship Wreckage YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Today's episode, Scott Hall in WCW. And before we start the show, guys, let's showcase some of the amazing shows just announced for the World Championship Wreckage YouTube channel during our 100 subscriber live celebration. First up, we have Queen's Court, Monday Night Raw revisited by the Tribal Queen Brie, Mike Duplessis, and Husky Rhodes, where they watch Monday Night Raw from episode 1 on and discuss the episodes they just watched. Next, we have Ethan's on a Forklift, Monday Night Madness, where he will watch Monday Nitro and discuss the episode or episodes that let us know the storylines going on within WCW at that very time. From Cold TV, XLJ, and Mr. B-Roll present Fantasy Warfare, where they take two creators, give them a roster of wrestlers, and have them go to war. Next up, we have the Ginger Ninja Jaxpo in World Championship Wreckage's title run, where the Ginger Ninja will go over a title run of a particular wrestler. What was Rey Mysterio's first Cruiserweight title run like exactly? You'll have to tune in to find out. And finally, the return everyone's been waiting for, the Wrecking Crew, as Husky Rhodes will go over the evolution of hardcore within ECW. And if that's not enough hardcore for you, we will also be having the Wrecking Crew Retrospective Podcast, where Husky Rhodes will explain the evolution of hardcore in longer form with special guests. It looks like World Championship Wreckage is off to an amazing start after its first 100 subscribers, so let's go! Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. DadHat would have killed me if I wouldn't have said that.
First, super hyped about this project.
Yes, boys.
The Americream Dream, Husky Rhodes, baby.
My weird junk just like diving into the sand, just like
Teabag in the sand.
It's nostalgia to the max.
Good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday. Welcome to another episode of World Championship Wreckage. Today, we're talking about Scott Hall in WCW. Join with me, as always, from Botch Spots and Chair Shots from Rivet City Radio, my buddy with the nice new fresh and clean haircut.
Look at those lines.
Yeah, look at those lines. The Will Gray. And down below, not only a Texas All-Star wrestling superstar, but a host of Icon here on World Championship Wreckage, the Silverback Nate Slater. Join us in the guest chair. I'm excited to have you on, buddy.
Man, thanks for having me, guys.
Always a welcome. But first of all, for some business, I'll put it in the description of the video. Nate's got some new merch on Pro Wrestling Tees. Go cop a t-shirt. There's cool signs.
Go buy shirts. Go buy shirts.
I will
All
put
the
that
shirts.
description I will put that link in the description for this video.
Your shirts there. Make sure you buy them both.
Buy them both. Buy doubles. You never know. They make great Christmas presents.
They do.
So.
They do.
But today is Scott Hall, and we've touched a lot on Scott Hall in the past. So some of this, I'm going to try not to go into a lot of the repetitiveness. But, we've covered the Outsiders and their invasion. We've covered Bash at the Beach 96. So this is we're probably going to jump over that kind of stuff. We'll touch on it briefly so Nate can, give his thoughts on it. But for y'all, what is your first memory of Scott Hall? Is it the Diamond Stud in WCW even earlier on? Is it Scott Hall in the AWA with the gorgeous stash and the hair with Kurt Hennig? Was it Razor in WWF? Or was it jumping the guardrail as the outsider?
I think for me, I vaguely remember seeing Razor as like Scott Hall as Razor, but I wasn't a WWF guy. So for me, my real introduction to Scott Hall was the outsider, was the story that, hey, they're invading, which at that age, you're like, what the hell's going on? So
Yeah.
for me, that really drug me in, and it really captivated me.
Well,
I have to agree 100%. The 96, him jumping the guardrail was kind of it for me. At 11 years old, I hadn't started flipping the channel quite as frequently yet. I was still mainly watching WCW, and seeing him jump the guardrail was kind of the first one. I knew who Razor Ramon was, but I wasn't super familiar with his work.
Yeah.
Not as an 11-year-old kid, at least.
I remember the Diamond Stud. I remember the Diamond Stud. Probably more because of the Chamber of Horrors match, because he was in it. He was just one of the ones that was in that wonderful, horrific match. But when he jumped the guardrail as Scott Hall as the outsider, I did not connect the two. And even going back and looking, like, you look at the Diamond Stud and Scott Hall in the AWA, he was jacked. He was beefy. He was big. He was broad. He comes in as, he goes to WWF as Razor, comes in as the outsider. He's lean. He's still very muscular, but he is just lean and skinny. So it didn't register, even though same haircut and everything, like, didn't even register. So, yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat. Like, jumping the guardrail, being an outsider, that was the first big moment. But, I mean, looking at it in hindsight, I remember the Diamond Stud. The Diamond Stud was cool. It was different. It was, I mean, it's a gimmick, but it's at the same time, it's not at the same time. It was a cool name to go along with DDP. Like, it was cool to kind of see. I mean, nothing. If you're looking kind of at the Diamond Stud's accomplishments and everything, the Diamond Stud was there for like a year and a half or two. Like, it looks like he made his debut in 1991 and he was out by 92. So, yeah, it looks like the very first, like, when he first gets in, we're looking April of 91. And then, I mean, he's out and he's making his WWF debut, let's see, May of the next year. So, I mean, just over a full year as the Diamond Stud. You hear interviews between Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and, they talk about the Diamond Stud and Oz and everything. Yes, it's about the money when they return, and they are very obvious about that. In the moment, and Nate, I'll throw this to you because you work in the business. Yes, it's about the money, but as someone who's going to be in the ring and being creative, is it worth the risk going back to a company that literally had you as the Diamond Stud and Oz for that much money? They can promise you everything under the moon, but
Well, it wasn't just money though, right? Because they had the rights to do and control their characters. I think that was in their contracts. Is they were told that they had creative freedom with their characters. So being able to kind of control your own narrative, I hate using that damn line, but being able to control your own narrative and they're wanting to pay you a shitload of money because they got a shitload of money to go.
And they got
a shitload of guaranteed money.
And
because WWE, they weren't Vince wasn't guaranteeing cash on his contracts. Mm-hmm. These guys, whether they went in and worked one match or 365 matches, they were getting paid the same amount no matter what. And at the time, fucking unheard of in the business, because Bischoff just started writing blank checks to guys, and he had that Ted Turner money, and nobody in wrestling up until this point, even Jim Crockett himself, didn't have Ted Turner money. And Bischoff could write these blank checks. He was giving everybody 7-figure contracts.
Yep.
And we're thinking 1996, not 2023 Tony Khan. You know what I mean? This is 25 years ago. And Bischoff was just handing out 7-figure contracts because he could.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's had blank slate. Like, oh, here you go. You know,
Yeah.
and the whole favored nation thing that Scott Hall is always the one that brings it up in any interview I ever watched him, and they talk about contracts. Like, he loved that because it's like, hey, you get this, you ask for this much, because then that bumps me up for that. And I'm like, that's just smart. That's just smart business. Well, you know, they make their debut. We've talked about the invasion and everything, and it's only a couple of weeks. It's I think we said 4 or 5 weeks before Bash at the Beach, we've talked about it on several episodes. They could have milked that longer and teased even more. But we get Bash at the Beach, we get the debut of the NWO and everything. But, you know, of course they run roughshod for a while. Did you guys think that it was smart? Yes, this is a Scott Hall episode, but they're tied together for a good chunk of this before, you know, they separate. Would you guys have preferred to have seen Scott and Kevin as individuals?
I don't think it goes over. I don't think it gets over the way it does without them being together.
Okay.
I don't think.
Well, not coming in, but I'm talking about like after the NWO is formed. Would you have preferred them each to be doing singles? Like, yes, WCW didn't have like enough mid cards for each of them to have a title. So get them winning the tag titles is where I'm heading to.
Yeah, no, I think. I mean, if you look at any good faction, you've got 2 that work together, and you've got 1 that runs.
Yeah.
And if you've got a 4th guy, he's normally the distraction, or he's got some kind of other title. I mean,
that's what 6 was when 6 finally arrived.
Great example is Evolution.
Yeah.
Great example is Evolution. Because you had Ric Flair that was basically the head of Evolution, but he didn't have to be the title guy. Hunter was the title guy until you had that fallout where then it went to Randy and then to Batista. But Batista and Randy held the tag titles. That formula works better when you have 3 guys, 2 guys for the tag and 1 to go after either the heavyweight title or the other another singles title. I mean, look at Imperium. Imperium's the same way.
Yeah. Well,
you know me, I'm an analytics guy. I'm going to look at the numbers, right?
Yeah.
It's hard not to lump him together with Nash and Hall, like to look at him as a pair, because pulling up the match docs, you see entirety of 1996, nothing but tag team matches.
Tags, yeah.
He doesn't have his first singles match until the end of January 97 against Booker T. And I am looking at lists right now. This isn't all from memory. I fully admit it. But, you know, I'm looking at the analytics behind it. It's hard to talk about him when he had 5 years in the company and over 25% of that time was spent in a tag team work. You have to look at it as it has to be Hall and Nash in so much of the conversation because of that. Because that was, you know, like I said, so much of his work in WCW specifically.
Yeah. It didn't bother me at the time. I think as I got older and watching, especially because, again, I was a WCW guy. So my WWF stuff was watching it years later. So I was watching the Razor stuff already knowing what comes later as Scott Hall and the Outsiders and the NWO. So, but it's still, as an adult, it's weird to me that in the WWF, I mean, Diesel at one time was your world champion. Scott had the next title right underneath it. But when you jump to the next company, they're a tag team. You took 2 top stars. Yes, you're putting them in a top faction, but you're putting them in a tag team. That just as an adult fan, that just kind of always kind of bugs.
Yeah, but you got to look at who was at the top of that pyramid.
I know.
You got to look at, and people can hate him all they want. You can't take away what Hogan did for the fucking business.
Yeah.
I'm still a Hogan fan. I will mark the fuck out when I finally get to meet him. I do not care. You know, the cancel culture shit pisses me the fuck off, and that's all I'm going to say about that. But Did he say some fucked up shit? Sure.
Yeah.
But who hasn't said some fucked up shit in their life?
Everybody, all of us.
All of us have done something that could get us canceled.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I 1,000% have said that if I was a public figure, even in the small minuscule amount that I can say I am now, 20 years ago, you put me in my early 20s, I would have been canceled as fuck for being a womanizer and a fuck boy and all the terrible things I was doing in my 20s. 100% would have been canceled for that.
I'm in the same boat, brother. I am in the exact same boat.
Thank God I settled down before I decided to throw myself into the public realm.
Anyway,
later on.
But so we get to Halloween Havoc 96 and everything. And Halloween Havoc 96 is one of my favorites because, I mean, you get the whole Hogan with the toupee, you get the monster truck match, you get the Yeti, but you get Scott Hall along with Kevin Nash getting their very first titles in WCW from coming back. And we're getting the tag titles. And I love these old WCW tag team title belts. They look heavy. They look weighted. They look worn. And I love it. After this, they transition to the ones that literally look like they're meant to fit like children because they get so tiny, especially like Kevin Nash holding it or Scott Hall when they change over to the next one. But yeah, so we continue just like Will said. We continue through the rest of 96. It's tag teams. He's in World War III, which we have covered in 96. Does not win there. We jump into 1997, and we're still getting tag teams, and I mean, look at who they're feuding with too. The Nasty Boys, Harlem Heat, Luger and the Giant. I mean, you're naming these.
Wasn't Public Enemy still around back then too?
I'm sure. Let me see if they got with them.
I'm pretty sure they were. Nasty Boys, Faces of Fear.
Ooh, that's a name I haven't
thought about. Barbarian. The Extreme, Ace Darling, and Devon Storm. Devon Storm, that's Crowbar from back in the day. Shout out to him. He was just on the show. Bunkhouse Buck and Mike Enos. That's a deep cut right there for your WCW guys.
But yeah, I mean, and we are. I mean, the Steiners. I mean, we're still getting the Steiners before we get to Super Brawl where they Scott turns on Rick. So I mean, they're feuding with some big Hall of Fame worthy names as a tag team. So I mean, looking at it that way and looking at like as we're going through the list and everything. Okay, yeah, that's fine. You got two main eventers as a tag team. They're going up against other main eventers as tag teams. I'm okay with that. That doesn't make me as mad now actually putting it out there. There's some, I mean, when he's not tagging with Kevin, he's tagging with like Randy Savage. He's doing stuff with Six. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he in this role in WCW, yes, he has some great matches as a tag team and everything. But who can forget the survey on like it's his version of, or Cody has his version right now of the what do you want to talk about? It's the same thing back in the day with the Hey Yo and
everybody says
like, do you come here to see WCW?
WCW.
Yeah. Yeah, like it was all that. But I mean it worked. It worked. So, but as we the first big kind of singles feud you get with Scott Hall is Larry Zbyszko,
the living legend,
right? Who's a commentator. So you get you're getting and it's not like Scott Hall is like new to the business. He's been around for a while.
He probably wrestled Zbyszko in the AWA.
See, that's what I'm thinking. I need to go back and actually see if that's actually. All right, analytics, dude.
I'm on it.
But I love this. I love this like kind of meshing of old school and bringing Zbyszko out of the booth to wrestle again. It also gave me one of my favorite unexpected heel turns ever with Dusty Rhodes.
They wrestled for the first time in the AWA in 1985.
So we are.
I was 1 year old.
I wasn't even born yet in the first match. To be completely honest,
what's the date?
August 22nd of 1985. Larry Zbyszko, Scott Hall to a 15-minute time limit draw in Winnipeg, Manitoba.
I was almost born. I was negative 1 month.
Yeah.
Look, we'll do the parents' math. I was 14 months old.
Lots. He had a huge feud with him in '85. They wrestled a bunch in the AWA.
Cool. So that's cool. I would be intrigued to go back and watch more of this and see if that ever got brought up on WCW, especially because, Bischoff worked in the AWA as well a little bit. So, I mean, I'm sure he would have been like, hey, yeah, why not throw that in there? That's probably why Bischoff threw them two together. Like that makes a lot of sense now that I'm kind of piecing stuff together. But it gave us, Dusty Rhodes turning heel, joining the NWO, and then still being on commentating as a heel NWO commentator, which is so weird to me. Like still, because I don't know, I just think of Dusty Rhodes as the baby face. I think of him as Flair is the heel, Dusty is that, but it was just cool. And I mean, he looked as 90s as he could with his black NWO shirt and his red leather jacket that's like a duster almost that goes down to his knees. What did you think of the pairing of Scott Hall with Dusty Rhodes here?
You want to go first, Nate?
Sure. I don't think back then I really understood it.
Yeah.
Thinking about it now, sign me the fuck up.
Yeah.
Sign me the fuck up. Like knowing everything that Dusty went through back then and how great of a mind he had to just sit under that learning tree.
Yeah.
Hell, just to even be close to a branch to be able to touch that learning tree.
Yeah.
I'd give almost fucking anything. So, how do you fine tune somebody, or how do you, what they say, diamond sharpens diamond.
Yeah.
So you gotta learn from better people before to get better.
It really makes me wonder if this, just as you're saying, if this was look, we're looking at you, Hogan isn't going to be around forever. We are looking at you as, a potential. So why not put you as one of the best to ever do it? Just like you're there, you're a top guy, but we need to get you to that top echelon. Will, what about you? Dusty Rhodes here with Scott.
I don't think this is speaking as me now, not as a young kid, because as a young kid, I don't remember how I felt about it. But now I don't really think it was necessary, but it worked. Mm-hmm. He wasn't in a position where he needed help on a mic, or he didn't need help. He didn't need somebody to help carry him in-ring work-wise. He didn't need help character-wise. It was one of those things where he kind of checked all the boxes himself. Mm-hmm. So to have the necessity of because at this point Dusty was the commentary managerial role versus anything else, so he didn't really need any of that assistance. So it was just like bolstering him and making him seem larger than life, more than he already was. I don't think he needed it, but it's one of those, like Nate said, diamond sharpens diamond. Like you take two really badass dudes who can talk, you're going to have a lot of fun with it, and that's what we got. And that's it. Like, I don't think they necessarily needed one another, but they did great together.
I agree. I totally agree. Well, the next big move for Scott Hall as we go through 1997 is he wins World War III. And I still stand, this is my favorite victory of all of them. and everything. I was excited about Scott Hall winning. I was excited about him finally challenging for a world championship. We've talked about in other episodes. Scott Hall to me is my number one person to never hold one of the big ones. And in the time when he was wrestling, the big ones were either the WCW championship or the World Wrestling Federation championship. And he never held either. So I was excited even then. Because even though I was still at the time as a kid learning who these were, I was hooked on the NWO from the second he jumped that guardrail. I mean, I to this day, the NWO is still my favorite faction ever. Even though I live in Charlotte and that's blasphemy to all my horsemen. But
we had a quick conversation over the weekend with a buddy of mine where top 5, I put the NWO at number 5. Top 5 wrestlers, the NWO, those 3 is number 5 for me. I can't separate them.
Yeah.
So
I was hooked. So, I mean, and Scott was always my favorite. He was always the one that pulled my attention. He could go in the ring. He was charismatic. I loved the outsider's edge. I loved that finish. I thought it was cool. It was different. You think he gets the guy so, and again, this is as a kid who did not watch him as Razor, had not seen the ladder match with Shawn at this point, didn't see all that. So all this was new to me at the time and thought it was just he was the coolest guy in the entire company. So him winning World War III, I was like, yeah, okay, let's do this. And then, as we know, Starrcade 97 happened, unfortunately. And the fast count that was not a fast count. And Bret Hart, in that position, which we've talked about. But he kind of gets put on the back burner because they have to fix this now, this non-fast count. So he doesn't get his world championship title chance until he faces Sting at Uncensored, which is a great match. It's a great match. March of 1998, he's facing Sting. I feel like if it had been anybody other than Sting at the time, they might have actually put the belt on him, or Hogan, if it had been one of those. If, let's just say that Savage at the time had the belt, or the Giant, or Luger, or somebody else, they probably would have finally pulled the trigger on him. But Sting is coming off of the tippity-top run of his entire career as Crow Sting. I'm still upset he never won a world championship. I'll say it anytime his name comes up, I hate that he didn't win a world championship. But Sting with Hall here. Conflicting styles. It's a good match, but it seems awkward to me when I go back and rewatch it. I don't know when the last time you guys have seen it, but to me it really showcases, okay, you've got Sting, who is a WCW through and through, have only worked WCW, with somebody that has been multiple places, because at times it's really clunky. It's really clunky because Scott he's being the entertainer. And it kind of loses that full threat in the matches. He does the atomic drop, and he does the little running in place. It's very goofy and entertaining instead of being a serious match. So what do y'all think? If it was somebody else other than Sting or Hogan, do you think they might have pulled the trigger?
No. I really hate to say that, but I don't. Scott Hall came at a really unfortunate time in wrestling, and here's why. You're one of the greatest of your generation, but, the handful of people that are better workers than you are Shawn Michaels and Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash and Sting and Ric Flair. And, dude, it sucks, but he just happened to come at maybe the best generation of pro wrestling in history. And he may be if you put him, you look at where he was, put peak Scott Hall in the 80s, and he could have been a world champion. He could have held the 10 pounds of gold. You take peak Scott Hall and you put him in wrestling today, and I think he would still get over and could possibly hold gold. I think it's just that matter of time that he was in the business where he was every time he would go somewhere, he had a Hulk Hogan or he had a Shawn Michaels or he had a Rock or he had a Steve Austin. You know what I mean? He was just in that period where it was that golden age of wrestling. And I'm not talking about Hogan and Macho Man in the 80s. It was just so big. And he was just another really great wrestler. I agree. He should have won a world title, but I don't think it would have made a difference in the 90s where he worked because there would have always been that Hogan or that Michaels.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to agree with it. We don't have to go long about it, but I definitely agree. Yeah. There was always somebody just that much better.
Mm-hmm.
He was great. He was fucking great.
Zero questions.
But somebody there was always somebody just a little bit better.
I feel like we can use that same comparison for a lot of what we're seeing in today's wrestling with both of the big companies. There's several people that are in that mid-card range that they're just, all right, there's a Seth Rollins, there's a Roman Reigns, there's a Cody, there's a this, there's a that. Like, they weren't there, other people will just climb right up.
Chad Gable.
That's the one that was on my mind.
He is a beautiful technical worker. He can talk. He's got comedic value and seriousness. He could have been huge in the territories or the 90s. You know what I mean? Because he has that comedic edge, but solid work. It's just really unfortunate because the huge character-based workers like a Roman or an MJF or a Seth Rollins are just swallowing him whole because he's just a really fucking good wrestler.
Yeah, he was the one that was literally in my mind as I was saying it.
Yep. The same when it comes to Finn.
Exactly, yeah.
Finn's always going. I thought he was going to get it this past weekend, but he's always going to be on that bubble, and I don't know if that bubble actually ever bursts for him.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we're going through 1998. He loses, to Sting for that World Championship opportunity. And we get to Slamboree 98. And eventually we will do this watch along. I will throw it again on the poll. It's still one of my favorite pay-per-views in WCW history for some reason. I don't know why, but it's always one of my go-to ones. And we get Sting and the Giant defeating the Outsiders. And Hall turns on Nash here. So we're going on 2 years. That's a pretty good run as a tag team, right? With several titles and good feuds and everything. What are your memories of the Outsiders finally separating?
I don't know if I remember that. The only thing I remember is when it
Havoc 98.
Huh?
Havoc 98. Powerbomb City after Powerbomb City.
Maybe. Was that the drunk Scott Hall?
That's where we're heading.
Yeah. That's what I remember. That fallout between Kevin Nash and Scott. That's what I remember.
Yeah. Well,
I look at it like this is exactly just following up what I was just saying about him having to compete with some of these guys. And you see him when he becomes a singles competitor and they turn on each other and it's him versus Nash. You see those little differences that make him, the 1A to everybody's 1. Yeah. And I don't want to say he gets exposed because this is tough when you talk about it like this because I don't want to take away from anything the man did. He's one of the greats. But when you see him work against a Sting or you see him work against a Flair, you see the little finite differences between a Flair and a Scott Hall. You see the finite differences between these guys and what he did. And it's not taking it away. You just understand. Like we said, for every solid single, without a doubt, one, that's the guy. Scott Hall was always the 1A, the quintessential, always the bridesmaid, never the bride.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and ask this question. Would you say it is because at this time he's in WCW with, as you would say, the wrestlers, where had he stayed in WWF, he could have potentially climbed that ladder and been a world championship as Razor in the entertainment business compared to the wrestling business?
I would say he would probably have had a better chance if he never left the WWF. However, I don't know if we are sitting here having this conversation today if he hadn't have left the WWF.
I agree with that.
It changed the whole game. It forced everybody to change.
You go to any wrestling, anything, convention, show, anywhere, you will find at least one NWO shirt somewhere. A hat, a shirt. You will see those 3 letters. So I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Like,
well, we know that Shawn Michaels' title run in '97 wasn't flush. You know, that's when WCW started to pull away, was around that same time, you know, for the 83-week run. So you say, okay, so if he never went and he did stay there, could he have been a viable threat to a weak Shawn Michaels who wasn't getting over with that crowd anymore? Because when you look at it that way, like, I'm not a huge fantasy booker. We're never going to rewrite the history of it. But looking at it from that perspective and knowing that Michaels' first title run wasn't the biggest, most successful he had in his career, you could say maybe Scott Hall could have been the guy then. You never know.
Razor was very over with the fans. I mean, he was to me, he was that start of that. He was the cool bad guy. He was just cool. But yeah, so we get the turn on Nash and everything. I mean, he holds the tag titles again with the Giant in that time frame. But yeah, we get to Halloween Havoc 98, and they're definitely playing up, unfortunately. And whether you agree with it or not, that's the route that they went down. They decided to showcase kind of reality behind the camera, on camera, drinking, not being in the best state of mind. I mean, I can picture the Nash backstage interview, which is pretty much just a monologue, like in tears of, you know, he lost his best friend. And we get to the Halloween Havoc 98, which is just him power bombing him over and over and then just walking away, and you don't get a finish to the match. I get why they did it that way, Nash walking away from Skull. But if you have a tag team was as hot and as popular, I feel like there need to be an actual legit finish here. Thoughts?
I'm okay with the finish. I'm okay with the non-finish because it showed he was pissed. He was pissed. Nash was pissed. And he worked all his anger out. And once he worked all his anger out, now he's remorseful. Because not only did he have to basically beat the brakes off of his best friend, but then he had to walk away. So I'm okay with it.
I get storyline wise why he did it. Like that, like
the non
because of like that.
Yeah, I think the non-finish resonates more than if you would have pinned him. Because then if you look at it, sorry, Will.
No,
if you look at it, go to Brock and John Cena. Go to Brock and John Cena. Did Brock really need to pin him after Suplex City?
No, not really.
It would have meant more if Brock would have walked away.
That's a good point. Yeah, good point. Well,
yeah, it was just in the weirdest way ever for him to just take an absolute ass kicking. It was almost like they protected him by him not eating the pin. His best friend had to beat him within an inch of his life, and instead of beating him, he just walked away. Technically, taking the loss himself because it was a count-out finish. Like, technically speaking, Scott won after having the absolute shit kicked out of him. So it's like, story-wise, like, having a finish may have given it a little bit of closure, but I think this was a good way to protect them both because it made it look like two brothers who got drunk and beat the shit out of each other. You know what I mean? Like, they're always going to be upset later. I watched my uncles get drunk and beat each other up and then the next day apologize and hug it out. Like this, kind of the same thing here. Like two friends went out there, beat the brakes off of it, and then they went with the story.
Well, friends can't argue if you're that close. They can't argue for too long because then they get back together 2 months later when Scott Hall shows up in a security guard uniform with the cattle prod stun gun at Starrcade and tasers Bill Goldberg, ending the streak. What'd you say?
Down goes Goldberg.
Yep. Although if you watch that though, he, twitches during the count. So technically his shoulder came up. You can argue that forever. You go back and watch the tape. But we get
you'd have twitched too after a live round from a cattle pro.
Sure, I would have. Give a quarter of a charge, I'm gonna be twitching.
I'm out. Look at that. I'll take a staple gun all day, every day. I ain't taking no fucking taser.
But we get something that sounds right up the late 90s WCW, a stun gun ladder match, right? Like Goldberg and Scott Hall. And the funny thing is, if it wasn't good the first time, they do it again. A stun gun ladder match, Bigelow and Scott Hall, because Bigelow was a part of it. So it's I don't know. That's kind of where that along with Finger Poke of Doom. That's when I started checking out. Like that's where I started flipping the channels.
When did SmackDown debut? Because that's right about where I switched. Once it became to where you could watch SmackDown on regular fucking TV.
On UPN.
Yep, on UPN. Once you could watch SmackDown on regular TV, I think that's where I started to switch. I was still trying to stay up to date, but it was hard.
Yep. So after the stun gun, Scott actually gets his first singles title here in WCW. He wins the U.S. Championship. I completely forgot about this. He defeats Chris Benoit for the number one contendership and then goes on to defeat Rowdy Roddy Piper at Super Brawl 9 to win the world or the United States Championship. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch that because I don't remember that. But it's also the same night. I know, okay, I'm about to give probably Will the chair here because, Will, what happens at Super Brawl 9 with Kevin Nash and Scott Hall?
Super Brawl 9?
Yeah, your favorite thing in the world. It involves Rey Mysterio.
Oh, my. This goes into the yuckiness, and we're eventually going to have to talk about this. And this is that glorious time where they thought it was a good idea to hand the pencil to Kevin Nash, and he proceeded to do things like the finger. This is I progressively say this, and I feel like eventually we're going to have to talk about it, and it's going to be an hour-long monologue about how terrible of an idea it was. The finger poke of doom, beating Goldberg's streak, the cattle prod on a pole match, Ray's mask, all the absolute just terribly yucky things this man did.
About Ray fucking losing his mask.
Like all of the absolute
Elizabeth hair versus Ray's
mask. It was such just okay. This is gonna sound. Do you remember the movie Richie Rich?
Mm-hmm.
And the kid who could get whatever he wanted whenever he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like Kevin Nash. His entire career, he never got to be the booker. And then when they finally let him be the booker, he was like, fuck it, let's do whatever I want. Like finger poke and let's make ridiculous match gimmicks. And, I want Ray's mask. Yeah. He was like the Veruca Salt of wrestling bookers. I want it now.
Wow. There's some to compare. Richie Rich and Veruca Salt.
But you remember the movie Blank Check. I would say Richie Rich because Richie Rich had the money. Blank Check was the kid that wound up with the check.
Oh, yeah.
Pulled the money, basically. Bought the Castle House down the street. Put a slide in.
You're right. No, he's Blank Check Kid, not Richie Rich.
Yeah,
I take it back.
Rich had the money.
We're naming so many movies from my childhood right now.
Facts.
If you guys watching this have no idea what those movies are, go
Check 'em
watch
out.
all of them.
Check
I want to watch Blank Check now. I completely forgot about that.
It's on Disney Plus.
I got another
Is it?
throwback movie I got to show the kids still. Short Circuit.
Oh, I like the second one. I can't stand the first one.
I love Johnny Five.
Johnny Five's alive.
Uh-huh.
But like as a kid, when he gets like destroyed and he comes back with like the mohawk and everything, it bothered me for some reason so bad. I don't know why. It not creeped me. I don't know. I had weird. It made me cringy. I don't know why.
You had nightmares of Johnny Five coming back with a mohawk.
Kick your ass into outer space.
Yeah. Now I would have to go watch those movies. Kids, go watch.
Love Short Circuit, man.
Oh my god,
Yes.
we're dating ourselves. Well, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall win the tag team titles again, and they're
Again.
and everything. So we get literally into the year 2000, and I mean NWO, through 2.0, which was like the red, white, and black together, the half and half with finger poke of doom, But we get into 2000, and literally in the year 2000, Scott Hall has 6 matches in the entire year, including his last match in the company, which I can't say it, his last match in the company, he's challenging for the world title. It is him versus Sid Vicious versus Jeff Jarrett at Super Brawl 2000. I can say with 100% certainty I have never seen this pay-per-view. I do not remember this match in any way, shape, or form.
You say Sid Vicious?
Sid Vicious, Jeff Jarrett, and Scott Hall in a triple threat.
No, I don't remember this match at all.
Is this the one with the Sid in his leg?
It might be. It might be.
That's
Well,
what I'm thinking.
I remember Jeff Jarrett making me check out. Like anytime Jarrett was on the TV back then.
I like Jarrett. I still like Jarrett.
He reminded me of a knockoff Ric Flair.
Oh yeah.
This is, people say recency bias because they've recently watched it in wrestling. I say regency bias because Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Lawler are always going to be up there for me, but I also grew up in the shadows of Memphis wrestling.
Yeah.
So like Lawlers and Jarrett's are like the Flairs and the Horsemans for the JCP guys, you know what I mean? Or the Von Erichs in Texas, like Lawler and Jarrett ran Tennessee.
I have something to show you once we get done with this before you jump off for your Tennessee loving heart. But that's how Scott Hall ends. It's funny, like every time we do an episode and I think, okay, I'm excited to talk about this person, it makes me go, man, like we did Kurt Hennig, and I was like, man, it really changed my opinion of like where Kurt Hennig stands, in some rankings for me. And now looking back at Scott Hall, I'm like, it honestly wasn't that much.
Can I say this?
Yeah.
Like doing this podcast has put I had these like rose-colored glasses on my favorites, and I go back and I look at it and I'm like, holy shit, guys! Like the WCW runs for some of these guys weren't all they were cracked up to be. Like going back and watching runs from the 80s for some of these guys, I'm like, they were much better in the AWA or Jim Crockett Promotions than when they get to the, say the big league, so to speak, when they get to a WWF or WCW. Some of these guys were already past, some of their peak, as it were. And Scott Hall, like I said, I think the biggest thing to take away from everything he did in WCW was he was running behind Sting and Flair and Hogan and Nash and, Luger and all of these guys that were just that much better. That's all it took. They were that much better. And that was it.
Never really thought about it, but doing this episode, now I have to agree with you.
I think I put Scott Hall over Lex Luger though.
Well, but still, you see, like
they're here, but I'm going Scotty here.
But you look at specifically with Luger, you look at the look, because he had that. Even if you just look at the body appeal of somebody like an Ultimate Warrior or Lex Luger, like they had, especially again at that point in wrestling, as we got to the end of the 90s, the body appeal wasn't quite the same. But when he was going against some of those guys, like that's what was selling at that point. So he was never that version of a pro wrestler, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think that's what kind of always was that one little bit that gave the other guys the advantage.
Cool. Well,
as we were in another section of our fucking childhood doing a podcast there, Justin, thanks.
That's not what I aim to do with this podcast, but for like some episodes, that's what happens.
I don't even like wrestling anymore, man. Fuck.
Tell Al, like, I gotta sell all my stuff now behind me. Like, gotta get rid of it now.
Liquidating everything.
Yeah.
I'll send you my address. Don't sell it. Just send it.
Yeah, I'll take that Mankind picture behind you. Wait, no, I'll take that NWO 3-pack behind you that I still can't freaking find anywhere.
Oh, you mean these guys right there?
I got one.
Yeah. I could have got it on clearance at my Walmart, and then my oldest one literally had a meltdown, and I had to get him out of the store, and I never saw it again. Literally, it was on clearance for $14.
Yeah, no, I paid full price for mine. As soon as I heard it was out, I went looking for it. Same with the DX one. As soon as the DX one hit, I had to go get it.
Agreed. They were on my list. I got the DX for my birthday, and I got the NWO for Al's birthday, and they're 2 months apart, and we didn't do it on purpose.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
This is still one of my favorites that Allie ever got me.
Oh, I like that one. Oh, that's the Bash at the Beach one. That's sweet. I've never seen that.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's really, really cool. Well, that's Scott Hall and WCW. Sorry, kids, if you're watching this going, wow, that was a throwaway episode. Sorry. You can blame me. I put it on the poll.
Wrong.
This and disco, like, you're winning, but you're doing it the skeezy way.
I was raised on Ric Flair, the dirtiest player of the game. What do you expect? Anyway, before we get down to business with new polls and everything, Nate, tell them what you got going on, where they can find you, plug that merch, all that good stuff.
You can find me at Silverback Sighting on almost everything except for Twitter. I want to say Twitter is Nate Slater or Silverback or something. I don't know. It's out there somewhere. Pro Wrestling Tees, there is a store now. Just look for Nate Slater on Pro Wrestling Tees. I've got a couple of shirts up there. There will be new designs coming too. It's just work in progress.
And you can always find him here on World Championship Wreckage, doing Icon, talking about Sting, different moments in his career, and hopefully back in the ring soon.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. Well, what we got going on with Rivet City Radio and Botch Bots and Chair Shots coming up?
We just got done doing trivia tonight with editor-in-chief of the NWA magazine, Paul Pratt, a.k.a. Pollo Del Mar. That was a lot of fun. I've got interviews with Stump Marshall coming up. I've got the MLW heavyweight champion Alex Kane this coming week.
Sweet.
So lots of cool stuff. I stay busy. We've got New South shows coming up next Saturday and the week after. So today, Allison said, a buddy of mine asked, when we can hang out. And Al said, you're available the second weekend in September. And she wasn't kidding.
Well, eventually I'm going to start recording Grounded for you, and I eventually can get that to you. Well, for us here with World Championship Wreckage, of course, WC Wreckage Pod on Twitter, World Championship Wreckage with underscores under between each word on the Instagram, TikTok, search World Championship Wreckage. You can find us there. We put the polls on Twitter and everything else. I have been really busy with work, so I have not been promoting as much stuff. But also, the channel has a lot of cool stuff coming up that you saw in the intro, unless Jay decides to change the intro between now and when we edit it, and it's something different. But we announced 6 new shows coming to the channel on our 100 subscriber celebration last week. So we've got Queen's Court with the Tribal Queen, Bree Stout, Husky Rhodes, and Mike Plessis. They are visiting. We're branching outside of just WCW. We're covering old school WWF as well. They're going to watch Raw from episode 1 onward, because Bree has seen very little of old school. And then we've also got the return of the Wrecking Crew, myself, Husky Rhodes, and our buddy the Ginger Ninja Jaxbo, talking all things hardcore deathmatch and extreme in the world of pro wrestling. We've got a fantasy booking kind of game show coming with XLJ the OG, where he is literally, it's called Fantasy Warfare. He is going to be literally, like, if it's Will and Nate and they're the ones in there, they're not going to know what each other has, but XLJ is going to go, all right, Will, you've got the NWA from the late 80s. All right, Nate, you've got Ruthless Aggression era and a couple different types of matches. You don't know. And then when you get to the episode, okay, well, for the tag